Okay, I'm live. It says here, this is James Tripp. This is a live stream for James Tripp Chaos Wave. And I'm going to confess to you right up front, this is a wild experiment. It's an impulsive thing. I've done a few live streams recently, but I decided earlier on today that I would do one and announce it ahead of time, do it at a specific time. Now, I told my wife I was doing this. And she said, well, how much notice are you giving? I said, well, I'm giving a few hours notice. She thought that was a bad idea, and that it would have been smart to give a few days notice, to promote it on social media generally, to put it out to my mailing list and all of that. And I know that she's right, but I'm the kind of guy that tends to want to do something when I want to do it. So I've gone ahead and I've done it now. I want to see how well it works. I don't know how long this live stream will be, but what I want to encourage you to do is, if you're watching this already, I can see there's a few people jumped on. If you're watching this already, what I want you to do is I want you to ask the questions that you want to ask of me. If you have been a subscriber to James Tripp Chaos Wave for a while, you're going to have questions come up in the, look at this, actually, look, this is different. I'm used to doing this on my phone. I've just seen things coming up here. So I'm a student looking to improve my focus and motivation. Any tips? That's an interesting thing, a student looking to improve your focus and motivation. The thing about motivation and focus, these are words for a start, and what do they really mean is a jolly good question, and to me they mean particular things, focus and motivation, and they probably mean something different from what they mean to a lot of people out there in the world, to the sort of common populace. So what a lot of people are talking about when they're talking about focus is their ability to stay focused on one thing, number one. And I too am talking about the ability to focus on one thing, but it depends on the chunk size of the thing. So I organize my life. Focus is a major concept in my own life, but I tend to probably do a bigger chunk focus than what this question is referring to, which I'm going to guess is going to be around like, right, I need to focus on studying this particular thing. That's a very concrete thing. My focus tends to be around what I'm creating in the world. So how do you focus on something that's detailed? Well, it's intimately connected to motivation, isn't it? The thing is, people say I lack motivation, but we human beings, we are always motivated. We are always motivated. We are always motivated to do the thing that we are doing. Outside of consciousness, we are goal-directed organisms. We've always got something we want to do, something we want to create, and we get busy doing it most of the time. So motivation isn't really an issue. The issue here is the judgment about where your motivation is taking you. So I'm a terrible person to ask this question of, because I am a natural innate rebel. I left school with no qualifications whatsoever, because I had no interest whatsoever in studying the stuff I was told I ought to study. As far as I was concerned, when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I was going to be a rock star. That was a given. So I didn't need to study stuff. But later on, when I left school, I went to university, and I went to university because I wanted to. I went to university because I wanted to. Now, I still didn't get a great degree because I went to university because I was hungry to discover things and learn things, not because I was wanting to prepare for exams or learn the particular things I was told I was supposed to learn at university. So if you're asking me how you get yourself to do things that you don't want to do, I'm probably a terrible person to ask. And you know what? I spent years trying to make myself better at doing that. Absolutely years trying to make myself better at focusing and concentrating and doing work that I didn't want to do, doing sacrificial work. Indeed, my wife used to say to me, I'm sounding like Columbo at the moment, talking about my wife a lot. She used to say to me, the problem with you, James, is you just don't want to do anything that you don't want to do. And she was right. So after many years of studying time management systems, task management systems, all sorts of things to try and make myself better organized, I stopped doing that. And now I have a particular approach to doing things, which is non-linear in its approach, i.e. it goes along with the Steve Jobs maxim, you cannot connect the dots looking forward, only looking backward. and it is generative, and it's a way of engaging with the world. It is a way of firing up my motivation and focus so that I feel alive for the thing that I want to create. But I don't get to choose 100% what that is. It's a co-creation with what comes up through me. So Joseph Campbell, the creator of the meta myth or the hero's journey story format, a scholar who studied mythology, he's known for this idea, follow your bliss, follow your bliss. And for me, that doesn't mean just going with whatever pleasure comes up, but it does mean looking into your heart and finding out what's in your heart, what fires you up, what has you come alive. When you get to know this, when you get to know yourself better, what fires you up and what has you come alive, and then you develop the courage to align with that and create from that in your life. Motivation is never an issue. So I don't have a problem with motivation. I've been fired up all day today. I've been creating stuff. I've been making things happen. I've been typing up some new copy for one of my websites. I'm doing all sorts of things. Why? Because I'm alive with the vision of it, alive with something that has me come alive, which you know, just sets me alight, so to speak. And that's what I would recommend. Now, unfortunately, in this instance, if you're a student, and what you're studying doesn't have you come alive, you're not hungry for it, you're not tearing into it, you're probably doing it because you followed the path. You followed the path that society dictated for you. I'm going to have to wear my biases right on my sleeve here. I'm a guy that home educates his kids. Why? Because I believe in children connecting with their inspiration. I believe in self-directed learning. You know, all kids want to learn stuff. They're hungry for it. They want to build a whole set of understandings and capacities to engage with the world. So they're totally alike for it. And one of the things that can stifle them the most is the inculcation of self-sacrifice and sacrificial work, of doing what other people do. The building into the mindset all the power lies outside of you, so you have to follow the rules of society in order to create, in order to get anywhere in life, right? So I'm not a subscriber to that. So I'm a terrible person. I failed in my life to get good at doing sacrificial work, completely failed. I'm still the guy, as my wife says, who doesn't like doing things that I don't want to do. So do you know what? I don't do things that I don't want to do. I don't do all the things that I do want to do. So my focus in life involves saying no to a lot of things that I do want to do and I would love to do. But the things that I say yes to are still things that I do want to do and I would love to do. So I don't know how to get better at doing work that you don't want to do, scholarly work, exam study, that kind of thing. But I do know that when you find what has you come alive in life and you develop the capacity to stand grounded in that and to create from that, you can create a fulfilling and rewarding life that serves you, that can bring in the kind of income you want and create the kind of freedom that you want. I know that you can do that, but to do it means waking up from all kinds of crazy programming that society puts in your head. And once again, I want to own the biases. I'm going to wear them on my sleeve there. I'm totally biased in my answer to that. So sorry, Ram, if that's not exactly the answer that you were looking for. So this is good. This is working. People are asking questions. Thank you for jumping on this open frame. Much appreciated. So I'm going to move to the next question from NLP Coaching. Self-work. What is the go-to technique you use and come back to over and over the years? Not the most effective, not the most elegant, not the best, but the one you actually use. I don't use one technique. I use lots, if you can chunk them as techniques. If you can chunk them as techniques. And one of the things I often get asked about self-application, self-hypnosis, these kind of things. And people always ask in terms of techniques and processes. Maybe I have techniques and processes. I don't know. I have spent time with formal processes. But I am a reflexive self-developer. I'm a reflexive self-developer. And there is, in a sense, what I've done inside of my own mind with regard to my, what you might call your mental game, your self-mastery game, whatever, personal mastery game. What I've done across the years is anything that I do, it's not that I go back to it because it always evolves. It always evolves. It's a bit like learning a martial art or something. If you stay in the game, developing yourself, you will evolve as a martial artist. And certain things that you used to have to bring consciousness to become instinctive, become reflexive. So what I'm going to do to answer this question is I'm just going to share some things that have been game changers. Many of these things I may not use consciously anymore, but they are certainly internalized. They're hugely internalized. So one of the first major game-changing pieces for me, in a sense, was... I was going to say Eugene Gendlin's focusing, but that's not one of the first at all. So I'm lying. I've just picked one from an arbitrary point in my history. But the idea that any mindset, anything that you think, anything that you can think feels a certain way. So anything that you can think feels a certain way. And this isn't necessarily an emotional charge. It can be subtler than emotion. And this is what Eugene Gendlin calls felt sense. So at any given moment, you can scan your way into your body and use your felt sense and use it as a sort of tuning point. You can be still with the felt sense of anything, with the felt sense of any given moment, and you can inquire of that felt sense. So this is something that I used to do a lot and is internalized now. Now I'm just tuned into felt sense. It's part of my internal ongoing communication system. So you tune into felt sense and you ask yourself, what could this be about? What could this be about? And you're going to come to you, if it works well, what you think it's about. Now, the trick is, on top of this, is also understanding that whatever comes up isn't true. The information you get tells you about what you're making sense of, but more importantly, often, how you're making sense of it. So I tune into that because it gives me information and it aids me in decision making, first of all, but it also aids me in becoming aware of how I'm organizing my reality. So that's a major piece, being able to tune into felt sense, absolutely huge piece. Another major piece, and you could say this relates, is what I call being able to maneuver in relation to your own perspectives. That is to be able to move in any moment in your mind and know how you are making things up to be in that moment is not how it is. To be able to step back from that. Now, this is in a sense being able to disembed from the trance you're in. But when you disembed or disassociate from whatever trance you were in the moment, you re-embed into another one. So it's useful in that instance. What I do is I disembed from any given trance self, and I connect into what I call my transcendent self, transcendent self, if you like. And I talked about this way back when I taught the, what was it called? Freestyle Mind Shifters Toolkit. So your transcendent self. I've spent a lot of time building my transcendent self. So let me give you a frame on what my transcendent self is as well there. Sometimes when I'm teaching this concept to clients, I borrow from transactional analysis. So this idea, and I sort of repurpose it. I'm not a scholar, so I take things from various branches of psychology, therapy, change work, personal development, spirituality, all kinds of stuff. I take stuff and I create with it, I explore with it, and I find out what's useful and what's usable. So I'm not a scholar of transactional analysis, but there's an idea in transactional analysis of parent, adult, child ego states. You've got parent ego states, adult ego states, and child ego states. And there are divisions within this, like nurturing parent, critical parent, these kinds of things, and free child and adapted child. I'm not sure, because as I say, I'm not a transactional analysis scholar. But one of the things that I often teach clients, and this is partly something I run for myself, is that if you find yourself going into a state or having a particular experience, one of the first useful checks is to ask yourself, how familiar is this? And if it's familiar, One useful way of thinking about it is you just went into a regressive trance. If it's familiar, it's happened before. If it's familiar, it's happened a lot of times before. So it is a state of mind being, a trance, if you like, that you go into regularly. It is a regressive trance. Now, a lot of regressive trances are child states. They can be states of fear, of reactivity. They can be states of joy. They can be all manner of states. But they're like child states. And what that means is those trances formed at some point in childhood. Now, often, if somebody has a regressive trance state that they want to change, they will often move to a critical parent state to look at it. They go, why do I keep doing this? You know, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just stand up in front of people and be myself? Why do I always get... So they go into critical parent. Now, a critical parent trance, if you like, is just another regressive trance, right? It's another regressive trance. It's an internalization of critical parenting, and it's an attempt to change self through self-flagellation and self-castigation. So when you're working with change work clients or coaching clients, they usually have a conflict between a regressive child trance, but also a regressive parent trance, often a critical parent trance. Sometimes it can be a nurturing parent trance, which can be useful, but it can also be undermining as well if that nurturing parent trance just goes for a lot of sort of pitying rather than nurturing. So I'm using this as a framework, by the way. This is just stuff that's a useful framework to make sense of something way more complex. So what we're interested in here is the adult state. The adult state. And an adult state, technically, maybe it's a mythological state, I don't know, but it's the state when you have full access to your full resource set, your full faculties, the you that can step back, not be pulled into a regressive state and look forward. So what I often say to clients when I'm teaching them this, and I don't teach all clients this, by the way, it depends on the client, on their, you know, their personal orientation psychologically as to whether I'll share this model or not. But the adult state, the adult trance state, which is equivalent in my view to the transcendent self, is the only progressive trance. It's the one that really thinks forward constructively, that brings reasoning, that brings evaluation, that brings freedom from ego attachment, and brings flexibility and all of this kind of thing. Now, here's the thing. Most people do not have a well-developed adult self, an adult trance state, a transcendent self. They don't. And what they do have is easily swamped by regressive trances. So when I'm doing developmental coaching with people, one of the things I spend a lot of time doing is assisting people in creating a robust transcendent self. This is what we're doing. We're working largely with the transcendent self, with the adult state. So this gives people a place of power to stand when running their lives instead of being sucked into these sort of regressive trances and becoming swamped. And this is a significant thing because if you haven't got it, and most people don't, this was a big realization for me a while back, is I never finished growing up, and neither do most people. I'm still finishing growing up. It's just that most people fall for the illusion that they've kind of already grown up, and there's no parents around that seem to be equipped to do the job anymore, and they don't realize that they have to do it themselves. You see, they have to take charge of finishing the job, building that adult self, that transcendent self, that self that they can stand in when they really want to get in the driving seat of their lives. So this is a hugely important thing because that is the self that does self-transformation. A poorly developed adult self is a problem for self-transformation. You cannot do effective self-transformation if you're constantly in one kind of regressive trance or another. It just cannot happen. So everybody's got something there in their adult self. They've got something to work with, something to build with. So I don't know if that's a technique, building the transcendent self, creating your adult self, but it's something I spend a lot of time doing. And I also equip my adult self, my transcendent self, with various tools, various frames, various ideas. Going back, some huge ones for me was initially when I moved from victim thinking to ownership thinking, to looking at outcomes, to working with outcomes, to always moving to a place of, okay, so what do I need to do here? What happens next? These days, my internal coaching is often, how do I create with this? How do I create with this? What comes up inside of me? How do I create with this? Given that I know my values in life, given that I know my internal strategies for hacking high vibration states. See, these are the things that are important. Knowing your strategies. Do you know your strategies, your internal strategies? Do you know what you do inside of your head when you're in your best states of mind? Do you know what you do inside of your head when you're in your less useful states of mind? Because if you don't know this stuff, it's very difficult to move. I know how to move my mind from a low vibration state to a high vibration state because of self-knowledge, not technique. Because I know how I structure the low vibration state trances. I know how I structure my high vibration state trances. So this is the kind of stuff, when people ask, what are the techniques? It's more about a skill set, a knowledge set. If you saw a top level pool player, I'm not claiming to be top level, by the way, I'm just a guy that's learning. But if you see a top level pool player and you say, what techniques do you use? You know, they might say, well, I put a bit of spin on the ball sometimes, but they're not going to have a lot to say. Because their ability is really, and their capability is really grounded in understanding and skill and not technique. Technique is crude stuff that gets you on the path, but it is by no means the destination. So there's all manner of great techniques, I suppose. I really like stuff like Robert Keegan's competing commitments work. I think that's excellent. Focusing, I think, is excellent. I guess you could say reframing, if you like, but I don't think of it in terms of reframing. I think of it in terms of how I am shaping my reality in this moment. What are the understandings I'm connecting with? I'm fundamentally interested in this, in bringing this to consciousness. But the most profound technique of all is witnessing. We human beings are, generally speaking, left to our own devices, absolutely terrible witnesses to our own processes, appalling witnesses to our own processes. When we up our game of witnessing our own processes, especially when we can witness them from a transcendent self, a developed adult state, it puts us in a profound position to recreate ourselves and recreate our lives. So sorry again if I outframed the question and didn't quite answer it, but hopefully there'll be some goodness and some gold in there for you. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff coming in now. Best experience, exercise, process, if any, to have people get hypnosis is another one from NLP coach. And I just lead people into experiences. I lead people into experiences and explore with the experiences when I'm doing hypnosis. So this is an important thing. I don't ever, when I sit down to do hypnosis with somebody, I'm not there going, right, I'm going to hypnotize you. I'm there going, you know, curious about what we together can discover and what they can discover. So I lead them into experiences and I assist them in exploring those experiences and making meaning around them. It's going to start with something simple. It's going to start with, you know, a card stick, a hand sticker, or maybe not. Maybe it will start with, one of the things I often do with people is I'll say to them, I'll say, do you have a memory when you think about it? It's a bit kind of embarrassing or cringy or whatever. And they invariably do. Most people do. I'll have them remember that. I'll have them, you know, remember the memory and feel the feeling, and then take about 30 seconds to run the charge off that. Usually using submodalities work, eye movement work. Sometimes I'll do something really crazy. I'll say, so really feel that. And then I'll move their foot a tiny bit and say, what's different? And things turn out to be different. So when I'm doing this kind of hypnosis, the thing that I really want people to start to become aware of is that reality isn't a thing. It's malleable. As my friend Anthony Jacquin says, reality is plastic. most people, again, going back to this idea that people are terrible witnesses to their own processes, don't even see how malleable their reality is. So one of the things that I like to do is bring that to people's awareness, because once they start to get that their reality is highly malleable, well, that's a useful thing, especially when they come to realize that actually they're the one who's making it up as it is anyway. So that's one of the ways I tend to use a lot of hypnosis. So I'm seeing a pattern here. I'm outframing people's questions, and there's a reason for that, which I'm not going to tell you right now, but one day I will. Okay, Demetris is asking confusion techniques in hypnosis. Confusion techniques. That's a strange question. Confusion techniques in hypnosis? Yes, there are confusion techniques in hypnosis, but I don't think that's the question you're asking. I don't tend to go that heavy on confusion. Don't tend to go that heavy on pattern interrupting. I'm more of a fan of exquisite pacing and leading. That's where I like to go. But I do like to keep people off balance. And I don't tend to think about it in terms of confusion. I tend to think of it in terms of just keeping them off balance. So I might start to lean in one direction, then change direction suddenly, something like that. I might, you know, talk about everything that's possible for them in terms of change and then back off to, of course, there's no rule in the universe that says you have to change anything. This is keeping people off balance, so to speak. I might ask someone to focus intensely and let your mind drift. And just shift. So I'll go to polar opposites a lot. When I'm helping people break down and deconstruct and dissolve identity structures that are painful for them, I do a lot of this kind of thing, toggling to opposites. Anyone who's seen the Tetralemma program and made good use of that will know what I'm talking about. So confusion techniques in hypnosis, it's not a thing I tend to think explicitly in terms of perhaps keeping people off balance. But, you know, for me, hypnosis, where it's at, is exquisite pacing and leading and absolute adaptability and utilization. Those are the most profound things, I think, in assisting you in being an excellent hypnotist, more so than being able to run confusion techniques and pattern interrupts. But that is just my opinion. Doesn't make it so. Okay, Ruben. Avoiding self-change goals with old habits. Avoiding self-change goals with old habits. I don't know what the question is. I don't. Sorry, Ruben. If you want to add a clarification, I will get to it at some point further down, but I can't quite figure out what the question is. So Sam, how to make yourself learn stuff faster. Excellent. I love learning stuff. Learning stuff is one of my favorite things. When you want to learn stuff, remember this equation. Let's imagine you want to learn to play the guitar. Remember this equation. Time spent with learning the guitar is the only way to develop your guitar playing. Or time spent with developing your guitar playing is the only way to develop your guitar playing. Now, you might go, well, yes, I'm looking at shortening the time. That might be part of the problem. It's not about the amount of time, it's about the quality of time. So you note that phrase, time spent with. Time spent with developing your game. Now, there's a distinction that I often share with people when I'm teaching them hypnosis. I share this with some of my coaching clients as well, because it applies in so many places in life. It is the distinction of get into versus get through. People are often in the get through zone. They're trying to get through things. I want to get through this so I can get to that. I want to get through this so I get to that. Often in learning, I want to get through this learning quicker. That's why you want to learn faster, right? Because you don't want to do the learning. You want to have learnt past tense. That is a problem. You see, the desire to get through learning and get to the place where I have learnt is a massive, is an attitude that fundamentally undermines a good quality learning state. And that's what you need to accelerate your learning. So it is time spent with, and it is the quality of time and quality of attention. You want to be really present with what it is that you're learning, really present, and you really want to extend into it deeply, richly. So it's Anders Ericsson, I think that's the guy's name, who's the guy that came up with the 10,000 hours rule that's often quoted in other places. Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, Daniel Coyle's Talent Code. But the thing that gets missed, particularly in Outliers, doesn't so much in Talent Code, is that Anders talked about a particular kind of time spent with, a particular kind of 10,000 hours, and that is deep practice. Deep practice. Deep. That means being really present, really focused. There is a quality of attention that you want to bring. I always want to go deeper in. Whatever I'm learning, I stop, I slow down, I go deeper in. So here's the thing. The paradox is, myself, I accelerate my learning by slowing down. I read slowly, very slowly, because I make sure I do not pass a sentence without having looked deeply into its implications, what it means, the idea it's communicating, how that connects with other ideas, where I can see it in my life, where I can potentially make use of it in my life. Damn, I'm a slow reader. I am a slow reader. I'm probably a slow learner, some people would say. In fact, I say I'm a slow learner. So personally for myself, I'm much more interested in learning deeply than quickly. Now, what that ends up doing is it means, because if you're going to spend 10 hours of really good quality time learning something, you're going to get greater results than if you spend 10 hours trying to get through the learning in a hurry and not really focusing and having a poor learning state. You see, so the very idea of I want to get through this, I want to hurry, ends up slowing you down. More haste, less speed. So that would be the thing that I would really recommend. And also, when you're getting into something, if you're NLP trained and you understand the idea of chunking, there's a good time to know when to chunk up and look at big picture patterns around what you're learning, and when to chunk in and look into detail. So shifting that chunk size in terms of, you know, how big are you looking? What are the elements? Keep switching up, by the way. Whatever you're learning as well, go deep into an aspect and then switch to some other aspect of the same bit. So if you're learning a piece of music, focus on timing, rhythm, focus on that deeply for a bit, but then switch up, start focusing on feel instead. Then switch up, slow down, focus on accuracy of finger work, then switch up, focus on something else, okay? But spend some good time, you know, with each piece yielding some dividends, then go back in, look at it another layer, take another slice on it. Okay. How do I make myself learn stuff faster? Sources. Oh, it flicked up. Sources for learning how to... Hang on a second. Yeah, so NLP coaching, sources for learning how to create a robust adult state. Wow, there's billions of them, an infinite number of sources virtually. People have been doing it since pre-Socratic Greece and probably before. What could I recommend out of all of that? I'll tell you what I like, what I found to be incredibly useful is Stoic philosophy, Stoicism. The work of Alfred Adler, I find extremely useful. Adlerian psychology. The work of Byron Katie, which overlaps with Stoicism and Adlerianism. Is that even a word? Adlerian psychology. That's been a rich source for me, as has the Three Principles stuff. Very rich source for me. General Semantics, Alfred Korzybski's General Semantics. And there was something else that just flashed through my mind there for a moment. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Do you know what it comes down to? It comes down to making sense of the world and making sense of yourself. There was an excellent comment from Chevalier, I think, on the video I put out this morning, I think. And he said, what if there is I'm gonna dig this comment right out, and I'm gonna open up my phone. I'm gonna read this comment this morning. I think it was a really fantastic comment. and I'm going to keep moving my lips as I do it, which is going to take any dead time out of the video, hopefully. All right, here we go, notifications. Right, this is a fantastic comment in my view. Let me just pause that there, pause that. Okay, so this was a comment that was left this morning from Chevalier557. And I really like this comment, Chevalier, if you're watching. Well, you already know because I acknowledged it. What if there was a knowledge of how the universe really worked? This knowledge was passed down through the ages and given to a select few. It incorporated all the best understandings of the mind, the universe, and the universe gave you the power to create what your heart desires. What if most of the information was already out there in the world, within all the books on self-help and the best of psychology? Very important point there. But it was also amongst lies and not put in the proper order so that people couldn't easily follow. Okay, so you've got to separate the wheat from the chaff, is what Shiv is saying here. What if people like you and Tony Robbins, that's kind of nice to get a mention in the same breath as Tony Robbins, even though he's never been an influence on me, he's a big lad in the field. So what if people like you and Tony Robbins perhaps had figured out parts of the formula and had it running in your life, though you didn't actually know the truth, but you could make assumptions and try and reverse engineer yourself and then try to explain it to the world with some results, but always finding new ways and changing ideas as you grew. How much more would your life change if you could have anything your heart desired? How much bigger would you think for yourself and others potentially? You don't know what you don't know, and I don't know what I don't know. So that was from Chevalier, and I really liked that. It was tricky for me to read because now I'm 45, my eyes apparently don't work in the same way. So the thing is, I love that comment because there is so much. He's right. He's absolutely right, you see. See, what if there was knowledge of how the universe really works? Do you know what that knowledge is? It's not really knowledge in my view. I'd call it understandings. Understandings that help you work with how the universe really works. Understandings that help you work with how you really work. Right? This is called wisdom. That's what it's called. And I have a particular interest in wisdom. I don't proclaim myself wise, although I am on a path of uncovering wisdom, because wisdom is practical, functional understandings that help you run life better, your life better, understand life better, engage with life better. That's what wisdom is. And philosophy, by the way, is a love of wisdom. Philo from the Greek to love, and or love, and Sophie, wisdom, philosophy. So one of the things that I really advocate that people do is expand their mind, inform themselves through people who have spent a good proportion of their lives pondering this stuff for a start, but ponder it yourself. Think things through. Think things through. The number of people, I sometimes say this to people, what's your philosophy in life? And I can tell you the vast majority of people will go, I don't know, live fast, die young, or come up with some flippant response. Now, I'm not judging anyone for doing that, but what it does reveal is they have not thought it through. They have not brought consciousness to it. So really, the real source, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, but the real source is your desire, your willingness, your hunger, your personal commitment to finding out, to thinking through, to discovering, to uncovering. This is the real source. So I would encourage that, a commitment. Do you know what? I'm going to find out. So my reply to Chevalier was, what did I say? I said, absolutely, beautifully put. I do believe that such knowledge exists, and for me, it's called wisdom. And for me, uncovering it explicitly, implicitly, and embodying it is the main game. It's the main game, right? And it is the main game. So people know me as a hypnosis teacher. I started out this channel teaching hypnosis, and I love hypnosis. Hypnosis is fascinating. Hypnosis is deeply fascinating to me because it is a vehicle through which we can discover so much about how human beings shape their experience. But to me, how human beings shape their experience is the really interesting thing. How I shape my experience. Why is that so interesting to me? Because I want to be able to be in the driving seat of that. I want to be able to shape with that. I used to run a program called Reality Shaper. This is what this was about, although the stuff I taught back then was crude probably, but nonetheless, it's a path that I've been on for a long time. So that would be it. It would be, yes, look for the sources. You're here on this channel. If I can pass some stuff on, if I can be a font for some of the things that I've learned through my own journeys and explorations and reading and research and training and being mentored and coached by some fantastic people, if I can pass some of that on, that's great. And by the way, the reason I've been mentored and coached by some fantastic people is because I sought them out. Because I am a seeker and I want to know. I am hungry for that kind of knowledge. So that would be the main source, is your hunger. Sven's Tricky Corner Studio, you're a huge influence on me. Thank you. Thank you, Sven, for giving some good vibes. I appreciate that. Johnny, enjoying the stuff. Can you recommend some resources for learning more about transactional analysis? I'm not familiar with that at all. I can't recommend any resources particularly. Jump on Amazon, put transactional analysis in the search. There's some classic books by Eric Byrne on it. I don't think I ever read them. I think what I know of transactional analysis, I was taught by by a trainer who ran a self-development program I did a while ago, and I've read some stuff peripherally on the web. So I'm no scholar of that, but if you Google it up, you can get into it. Okay, so let me move up. So Sven is asking again, this doesn't move. What program of yours would you suggest the most currently? I'm super interested in the tetralemma. I don't know what program of mine I would recommend currently. It depends on what you want to do. I really like the tetralemma, by the way. Tetralemma, so far as I'm concerned, is mind-blowingly powerful stuff. It is mind-blowingly powerful stuff. And yet it was the worst selling thing I ever created. Now, the reason is because I didn't do all the kind of flash marketing stuff. It doesn't have a sexy title. Transforming Realities with the Tetralemma isn't sexy like Rapid Induction Rituals or the No-Fail Protocol or all the other hypno stuff that I did. So I didn't lean heavily in on the marketing side, and that's one of the reasons it didn't sell so well. But interestingly enough, when I put that out, and I remember editing it and thinking, this is such valuable material. It's the only time I ever had somebody ask for their money back because they just couldn't make sense of it. And somebody wrote to me and said, James, I've got everything that you've ever put out and I love it and I've learned so much from you, but I can't use this with my clients. Now that wasn't true because I use the ideas in the Tetralemma endlessly with clients, with both the rock to recovery people I work with, the military veterans who are coming in, adapting to civilian life, transcending post-traumatic stress, those kinds of things, and with myself and my developmental coaching clients. So I don't use it explicitly in the spatially mapped way, but it's a way of thinking that sits underneath a lot of the conversational change work, conversational hypnosis that I do. So the Tetralemma is fantastic. But again, the answer to this question depends on what you want. I've got the Beyond the Subtle Fears program, which I'm going to re-release again. It's been released twice. I never had it out there in the world because to me it's rough and ready and it's just some webinar recordings. But I get so much good feedback from people saying, why aren't you selling that? I keep recommending it to people and they can't buy it. So I'll probably bring Beyond the Subtle Fears out again at some point soon. And Sven is letting me know his name. So Kate's 99. Do you still have to work at not being attached to outcomes, or does it eventually become automatic? It eventually becomes automatic, but it is not a digital thing. It's not like on or off. You're outcome attached or you're not outcome attached. I think in the last video I used the metaphor of tendrils. And this is a metaphor that I run in my life, because for years it felt like I was kind of underwater and I wanted to reach the surface of the water. And I was trying to get to the surface of the water, and there were all these kind of tendrils of weeds and stuff clinging on to my ankles, and I was trying to get to the surface. And this is a metaphor I have for years. It's a crappy metaphor, by the way. It's not a good organization of reality. I'm not encouraging people to use it. It's not one I organize my experience by anymore. But in a sense, or maybe it is, maybe I'm doing it right now. So you get fewer and fewer tendrils, fewer and fewer attachments. It becomes easier and easier for you to just shift. And it happens less and less often where you get caught up in stuff. This is almost true of anything when it comes to self-development. I've mentioned in other places that I got into this work initially because of an all-pervasive fear. I was terrified of life, other people. I had massive social anxiety, used to have to self-medicate a lot. That's how I got into self-development in the first place. I was scared all the time. When I was a kid, I'd have night terrors every night. Well, not every night, several times a week. I'd wake up screaming, still hallucinating. I couldn't be left at school when I was first left at school. I was just scared. I was a scared kid, and I grew into a scared adult. I was just scared of everything. Fear. My threat response systems, for whatever reason, were hyper-reactive, were kicking off like crazy. Now, what is life like for me now? Well, do you know what? I'm pretty grounded most of the time. I feel good. I feel solid. Am I fearless? I think the answer is no. And I don't think anybody ever becomes fearless unless they've got something, amiss with their brain. Why? Because it's a very human thing to have we have this threat response circuitry. But my threat response circuitry used to be hypersensitive and wired into a lot of stuff. And now my threat response circuitry is wired into a lot less stuff. It has fewer tendrils, and it's not so hypersensitive. But you know what? Occasionally I get a ripple of discomfort or anxiety, that somebody might call it. But here's the thing. When I do, I'm not had by it anyway. So it doesn't happen as much. And when it does happen, I can relate to it and maneuver in relation to it. And what I will usually do is I'll go, this is interesting. And going back to the question earlier about what techniques to use, I used to use felt sense light. I go, what could this be about? Why? Because my presupposition was it was a bad thing and I had to get rid of it, and I had to get under the surface and find out what it was about so I could banish myself and rid myself of all fear for the rest of eternity. But I'm a human being, so I'm always going to have these threat response circuits in my brain. So when it comes up, what I do is I step into my adult self, my transcendent self, because my adult self, my transcendent self knows something really important. It knows that I'm a creator. It knows that I can create with any damn thing that comes up in my life. Now, one of the things I love about Ericksonian hypnosis is the utilization principle. Use whatever comes up. Me, I create with it. That's how I frame it in my mind. I create with whatever comes up. When I'm doing hypnosis, I create with whatever comes up. Another way of thinking about this is like in improv theater, they say accept every offer, never block an offer. So I never block an offer in my life. I always accept every offer. If I have a sensation in my body, which you could call anxiety, I accept that offer and I create with it. You see, I create with it. And how do I create with it? I create with it by changing the semantic context of it, what it means. Some people call this reframing, but reframing tends to be the way most people do it, superficial. I will take it and I will use it and I will create with it. So what does this mean? I'll give you a quick example. I very rarely get into debates on Facebook anymore, right? You may have noticed if you follow me on Facebook, I'm not as active on there as I once was. I quit getting into debates with people because I get pulled in. But not so long ago, I got into a debate. I didn't get pulled in. I stepped into it. I walked into it. Who knows why? But I chose to walk into it. And it got quite heated. And when a debate gets heated, for me, sometimes some feelings, some sensations come up. I get kind of tunnel vision. It's like, right, it's not a useful place. Now, this happened just before a coaching call. I'm running a coaching group. And technically, that is not the kind of resource state that I want to be in for running the coaching group. So the old me would have gone, oh no, I've got to shift my state. I've got to shift my state, and would have tried to push the state away or get rid of it. But instead, there's a whole thing here, which I'm not going to get into, which is about circumstances and choice. I'm going to keep this super simple here because we'll end up going deep. But what I did instead was I recognized it and I acknowledged it and I created with it. And here's what I mean by created with it. I felt the feeling and I automatically moved to a position of saying, this is a human feeling. This is a very human feeling. You see, this is creating with it. Instead of going, oh no, this is a terrible feeling, I can't coach from this place. I make a different set of meanings. I create a different trance from it by saying, this is a very human feeling. And whereabouts could being this human be useful in the context of coaching other human beings? Right? That is a semantic chain of creation around a physical felt sense. This is accepting the offer. This is utilization. So instead of trying to resist the trance that came up and banishing it, I took it and created with it. So this, this is a fundamental approach for me. It's always creating with what comes up. So the reason I'm saying this in this context, due to this question, is because stuff still comes up for me. Not nearly as much, problem states, fear responses, outcome attachments. Of course, I'm a human being, and I always will be. I've got this fundamental archetypal circuitry in my brain. But the way that circuitry is wired has changed across time. And when it does fire, I can still step into my adult self, my transcendent self, and I can create forward with what comes up. So I hope that's a useful answer there. So let's see. So good morning, James, says they. Am I pronouncing your name right? So good morning to you. It's coming up evening for me. But, that's the thing about being international. So the next question from Erdogan is, hi, what do you know about Hypnosis humanist? I know nothing, Erdogan, so please forgive me. Dean has retracted his message, which is entirely reasonable. They said, be present and deep practice. Excellent advice. Thank you, they. And Ruben, clarification. With self-change, I find myself reverting back to old habits. I'm focused on the change. I'm good, but being informal, I found reverting back, thus change is not automated. Right, okay. So here's the thing. Make everything a developmental problem. Right? Make everything a developmental problem. If you look at a good maths teacher, they're going to set progressively more challenging math problems so that their students will develop as mathematicians by solving them. So if you've made a change and it hasn't stuck, well, you want to analyze it. You want to go into it. This is personally what I do. I will look at it and go, well, what worked and where did it fall down? What worked and where did it fall down? So once again, there's this skill set of being able to become a better witness to your own processes. And sometimes it's simply a matter of picking myself up and putting myself back on the path. Okay, but often if something doesn't automate, it's because there was something in the matrix of it that didn't fit. In NLP, they talk about ecology. Okay, when you make a change, you want to look at the ecology of that change. That change has to fit well with life or fit well with the life that you want. It doesn't want to be resisted by the broader system. So if that specific change you make is being resisted by the broader system, if you can troubleshoot that, maybe there's something you can change in the broader system. Or maybe the way you structured the specific change wasn't a good enough fit for the broader system, right? So there's points around ecology, being able to witness what you're doing, to be able to go around and do iterative loops and make adjustments. This is one of the reasons, by the way, sometimes I had somebody say to me recently, James, why do you do developmental coaching? Why do you do that? Why don't you just, I mean, you're a hypnotist, why don't you just bang them into trance and talk to their unconscious mind? Well, one of my responses to that is, could you take a 5-year-old child, bang them into trance, talk to them unconscious mind, and have them be the person they're going to be at 35? And the answer is no, and that's because we are developmental creatures. We are fundamentally developmental. And developmental means that we figure stuff out layer by layer. We change, we nuance. We have to engage with a world that is unfolding real time. We have to adapt. So one trial changes, they can work and they can really stick and they can last. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they revert back. Why? Because it didn't get adjusted up right. And if it's like, I'm thinking of the Eminem track, you only got one shot. If you make it a one-shot game, then you're out of the game. So for me, personal transformation is never a one-shot game. I'm doing it all the time. I'm a self-confessed personal transformation junkie. That's why I do the work that I do. I love self-transformation. I love transforming myself, how I show up in the world, how I engage. I love changing the results that I get. I'm always curious, what's next? Where can I go next? Okay, so I'm always in the game and never doing one-shot learning. So that would be my recommendation. Revisit it, pull it apart, nuance it so it works better with the system. What do you think about Sedona method? Have you found any value there? I'm trying to think what the Sedona method is. Is that, I'm not overly familiar with it, but is it the one where they kind of have you hold on to a thing and you talk about, am I willing to let this go? Am I ready to let this go? If it is, I think that's quite a cool little nuance. And I've incorporated that and changed it quite radically into some of the change work stuff that I do. But that might be the silver method that I'm talking about there. So I was getting confused. But again, not an expert. I don't pretend to be a scholar in any of this stuff. I am not a scholar. I'm a creator. I am interested in real world applications. So I will cannibalize any system rather than be a scholar of that system. But I can't bring to mind exactly what is in Sedona and what is not. So please forgive me for that. Craig Bagley, message retracted. Well, that's fine, Craig, and I hope you're doing well. So, Kailash Kumar, does tonality play a major role in hypnosis? Hell yes, it does. Tonality plays a massive role in all hypnosis and communication. It is profoundly significant and important in my view. And by the way, when I'm talking about tonality, I'm not talking about having a hypnotic tone. I'm talking about making your tone congruent with the states and the experiences that you want to evoke within somebody. Okay. Also marking things out, using tonality, analog marking. That's an important thing. Using it to spike primitive systems in the brain, spiking primitive systems. You know, I do this a lot. I told a story years ago, but I still do it. If something's happening that I want to stop rapidly, that's going to happen, I go, oh, I do this thing. It's amazing how often this works. Like this primal sound I make that stops people sort of writing out tickets, or where was I the other day that I did this? I was going in somewhere and I was late and they'd shut the doors and they said, you can't come in. This is back at an exhibition, a thing up at the book festival here in Edinburgh. They'd shut the doors. I was late. They weren't going to let me in. I went, oh, and they went, oh, okay, and opened the door and let me in. I just made sounds. Why does that work? Because our primitive brain precedes language. Before there was digital language, there was analogic communication. That is one of the most powerful ways to bypass the critical faculty. So yeah, tonality, massive. Day says, I've learned much from you and David Snyder in the NLP field. I teach myself. Good stuff. I met David very, very briefly, and I did want to spend more time with him at Hypno Thoughts. So hopefully I'll get to catch up with him and spend have a bit of more of an in-depth conversation next year. So can I suggest some materials on tonality? Yeah, watch William Shatner doing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Okay, so that's called overacting, but it's a good way to go if you want to develop your tonality. I would suggest maybe Hypnosis could be a good thing to look at. Look at great orators, great speakers, people who move people with their voices. Look at those people, find them, find great speakers on YouTube. Start listening to how people move their voices, how people use their voices. Find people that have impact, right? Emulate that. There's also a fantastic book called How to Argue and Win Every Time by Jerry Spence. I bought this years ago, thinking it was going to teach me all this clever stuff to do with logical language and how to outmaneuver people linguistically in arguments. It wasn't really about that at all. It was about developing your capacity to evoke emotive responses in people, you know, and there's a lot in there about using your tonality. He talks about doing these exercises where you make the sound of the wolf and these sorts of things. And I did all that stuff. I've done that stuff. I've done a lot working on my tonality. In fact, I'm thinking about posting a video, because if you watch videos of me now and how I use my voice compared to how it was when I started out, you'll notice there's a significant difference, because I've continued to develop my my voice, my state of being, all of these things as communication and influencing tools. So yeah, there's a few suggestions there. And Henry, what is your life-changing experience you had? What is your life-changing experience you had on you or any other person you treasure the most because of hypnosis? I don't know. I will come up with one. I don't know if this is a life-changing experience. It's just the thing that popped into my brain. And I've talked about this before, but many years ago, my grandmother, she's died. She is now dead. She's passed on now. She's died now is terrible grammar. Forgive me. But when she got old, she had macular degeneration, which means that the sort of foveal vision disappears and you end up with 2 blind spots in your vision. But because our minds make up our experience, our minds literally create what we experience. Once the input channels were gone from those nerves because they'd shut down, the brain just carried on making stuff up. And what some people with macular degeneration get is a condition called Charles Bonnet syndrome. And in Charles Bonnet syndrome, the characteristic experience is what's called homunculus hallucinations, basically the hallucination of little people. Why are they little? Because they've got to fit in that missing blind spot, but they really look like they're in the world. So my grandmother, she called the police one time. She said, there are these children in my house running around, making mischief. And of course, they thought she'd gone crazy. They thought it was a psychiatric condition to start with, but it wasn't. It was a neurological condition. And one of the things that was sort of greatly satisfying for me was to be able to help her. And this is using conversational hypnosis, not formal hypnosis, to help her, number one, with her anxiety. She was experiencing a lot of anxiety around it. But number two, to also help her shift her mind to understand that these things were not real, and to develop strategies for distinguishing between what was real and what was not. Now, one of the reasons that I think possibly this comes up is because whilst I work with clients a lot, and it's always satisfying to get shifts happening with clients, when it's someone who's a friend or a family member, you can really help out. That's a lot more. I don't know. It's just, it really matters to me. It's so satisfying to be able to do that. Aside from that, I love working with my clients all the time. I love it when anyone gets a shift. It's hard to think of the most. I just love it. I love it when people get shifts and their lives change. I just love it. So it's hard to pick out a particular one. Again, some with family come up because family is important. Being able to help my girls out with their experiences in life, you know, helping my daughter out with her elevator fear or her own nightmares and this sort of thing, scary thoughts, and you know, all of these sorts of things. But any shift, yeah, always getting shifts with clients or shifts with myself, it always brings me a great deal of satisfaction. So yes, we're getting down. Once I get to the bottom of this, I'm going to race down to the bottom and we're going to finish up because it's a long open frame, this. So Could you give some advice on conversational hypnosis? All right, I'm going to give you some advice on conversational hypnosis. People contact me a lot and they say, James, will you personally tutor me in conversational hypnosis? And I always ask the same question. I say, what is it that you, what's your context? What is it that you want to achieve? What's the result you want to get with it? And the vast majority of times, 9 times out of 10 doesn't even cover it. 99 times out of 100, people go, well, there isn't really anything. I just want to be able to do it. Or sometimes they give a very vague area like sales, which is okay. So first piece of advice I would give you is pick something that you actually do, an area where you can actually apply this and regularly do it, because you're going to want to practice it regularly, and start getting clear about the kinds of mind shifts you want to create. The kinds of mind shifts you want to create. A lot of people learn conversational hypnosis in abstract or try to do so. And it always just is this flaccid tool that never gets applied. I'm amusing myself. My childish, infantile mind is amusing itself with the term flaccid tool. So please forgive me for that. I shall move on swiftly. Yeah, so here's the thing. Milton Erickson, he is famous for many things, but he is infamous for having said, one of the things he said was, Bandler and Grinder really cracked the nut on my work. Those NLP boys really cracked the nut on my work, something like this. The trouble is they took the shell, but left the nut. Now, a lot of people will go, ooh, catty, but actually I think it's valid. I think they did take the shell, and I do think they left the nut. But think about this metaphor of a nut and a shell. A shell is there to deliver the nut to the fertile soil, to keep it protected until it lands in the soil and can grow, right? So if we think about delivering, what we want to know is, what is the nut? What is it that we want to deliver? And if you don't know, if you don't have clarity in what it is that you want to deliver, if you don't have clear intention, you don't know the mind shifts you want to get, it's really challenging to learn conversational hypnosis. So when I first learned conversational hypnosis, I had 3 areas of application. Number 1, I was teaching martial arts. Number 2, I was doing manual therapy. Number 3, I was a magician and mentalist. I had 3 clear areas of application. And what I did is I sat down in those areas and I thought, what are the shifts that I want to create with people? What are the shifts I'm constantly looking to create? I listed them and I started looking for shifts to create with people. And then I'd go away and I'd sit down and I would write out language patterns using initially the Milton model. That was that's the go-to place often to start with conversational hypnosis. And I would write out patterns and I would write them out and write them out and write them out. I'd also write them out on cards. I've shared this idea before, on little educational flashcards. I carry around my own pack of hypnotic language cards that were tailored to my specific outcomes, you see. Now, I wouldn't memorize them as such. Once I get into the situation, I just let myself flow. But that will be my advice to you. Get clear on your context, get clear on the kinds of shifts you want to make within those contexts. Sit down, formally write out patterns, write them out on educational flashcards, learn them. As you learn the patterns, by the way, here's another thing. Go into the experience. Imagine what it would be like to be moved by those. Feel each word. Experience each word. Explore in your own mind how each word moves your experience. Compare and contrast different phrasings and note for yourself the impact on you. That doesn't mean it'll be the same for other people, but it's still a rich source of learning and really starts to connect you in to the profundity of a lot of these patterns when you start to go, actually, that really is different when it's worded like this versus when it's worded like that. So yeah, there's a few top level tips. They says, essentially you performed alchemy. Very possibly. For me, alchemy is self-transformation. Okay, sometimes I think about the difference between magic and alchemy, and I do think in these terms metaphorically a lot of the time. Alchemy for me is personal transformation, self-transformation from the inside out. And magic for me is the ability to make things come about in the world that are aligned with your desires, needs, and wants, simply through how you show up and engage, not through like old school project planning and not through the get through zone. So the two are related because how we show up and engage with the world is shaped by who we are from the inside out. And when we repattern ourselves, for me, that's what I would call alchemy. Sven's Tricky Corner Studio. How can I do developmental coaching with you? A lot of the videos I do, they have a pop-up and they will send you through to my website. If you want to do one-on-one coaching, that's jamestripp.co.uk. But I also run coaching groups. I've had the 2 Power of 8 groups that I've been running. I've just concluded, and I'm going to run at least another Power of 8 group, which is coaching creators. And by creators, I mean people who are interested in living as a creative force, showing up in the world, and being able to, in this non-linear way, this generative engagement way, not the old school grind through project planning way, be able to start creating magical results in terms of life and lifestyle. For me, on my own bias is towards creating freedom for myself and my family. I have a track record of success in doing this through transforming myself and how I show up in the world. So when I'm coaching from a very congruent place. But yeah, you can work with me one-on-one, jamestripp.co.uk. Otherwise, keep your eye out for when the next Power of 8 group gets opened for application. Okay, so we'll get the Tetralemma program. Thank you. Okay, Sven, and when you do, make sure you join the developing group, the Hypnosis Without Trance developing group on Facebook. You'll find out how, and keep engaging on the channel because I can answer your questions, give you feedback on the channel as well. So NLP Coaching, what's your current read? I have just finished The Magus by John Fowles. I'm going to read it again. The Magus was mind-blowing, very rich. I think there's a lot that I can get from that by reading it again. These days, by the way, I often read books multiple times, and I will do them in read format and audio format. Because again, it's about going in deep rather than trying to get through. So I have just read The Magus. I've also just bought, but I'm not sure if I'm going to start reading it. I might hang back until I've done The Magus again. I've just bought Total Recall, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an interesting guy. I'm interested in anyone that I would call a creator. And Arnold Schwarzenegger has a track record of stating what he's going to achieve way ahead of time and then damn well achieving it. So my old coach, Steve Chandler, interviewed Schwarzenegger in the 70s when he was just like, he'd like got one tiny bit part in a film. And he told Steve Chandler that he was going to be the highest paid movie star in the world. And Steve kind of laughed. He thought, this crazy guy with this weird accent, how could he possibly be the highest paid movie star in the world? And lo and behold, when Terminator came out after that, Schwarzenegger became the highest paid movie star in the world. So Schwarzenegger has a track record as a creator, as somebody who says, this is what I'm going to create in the world, and getting busy and making it happen. So I'm always fascinated by anyone who's a creator. So I'm curious as to Arnie's reflections on his life. Okay, so Craig, I'm well, thanks. Currently having my mind melted through The Magus. Have fun with that, Craig. And I'm wondering if you're going to expand on your unpacking. I may well do. As I say, Craig, I'm going to go through The Magus again because I think that there's a lot in it regarding flexibility, utilization, and particularly the ability to shift frames on the fly in a way that destabilizes. Somebody asked about confusion earlier. And I think there's a lot to be learned from The Magus about unbalancing people psychologically and undoing their sense of reality. And I'm pretty sure that The Magus is a major influence on Bandler and Grinder as well. So I think there's a lot of richness to be had from that. So I will probably do some further unpacking after I've gone through it the second time. Okay, I'm going to skip. Kate C99, thank you, James. Really interesting, helpful. Thank you, Kate C. Stephen S, hey man, can you use hypnosis to do lucid dreaming? For me, I'm not quite sure of the question, but I will give you an answer to that. my capacity to lucidly dream has gone up significantly simply through my practices of moving my mind and consciousness in daily living. So I think that what we do in our dreams is often a reflection of what we do in a waking state. In fact, all our dream is our brain carrying on doing its brainly things in the absence of the external inputs that are coming in. So visual stuff gets shut down, auditory, all of this gets shut down. We go in, our reality shaping faculties keep turning, our creative faculty keeps churning, and keeps making experience. So our ability to move our minds and shift our experience in a waking state carries through to dreaming. You get this, by the way, with anxiety dreams and this kind of thing. People who are anxious during the day often will have anxiety dreams because it just carries on. They're just being anxious while they're asleep versus being anxious, doing anxiety while they're asleep versus doing anxiety while they're awake. So we often carry through what we do into our dreams. By the way, you see this with people that get dementia, certain forms of dementia. When reality breaks down, they just start to generate entirely from their worldview, whatever it is. So if somebody sees the world as a happy, kind place, they're likely to be a happy dementia sufferer, so to speak. But if they see the world as a dark place full of dangerous forces, they're going to have a bad time as a dementia sufferer, because it's like going into a waking dream. So what I would say is, for myself, I used to, as I mentioned, get night terrors, and they were not good. And even as an adult, I continued to have nightmares until I learned NLP and started to do a lot of submodalities work. And I remember having a particular nightmare come on. I won't go into the content of it because it's not necessary, where I just suddenly realized, oh, well, I can move that there. I can move that over there. I can just change that like that. And I don't always lucid dream. I don't always remember my dreams, and I don't have a particular interest in it, although my sister-in-law is a lucid dreaming nut and has kept a dream diary for about 25 years or something, and has, does a lot of formal lucid dreaming practice. But for myself, I will often become lucid in dreams. And I will often become lucid in dreams, particularly if they're hitting a point where things are not going quite as I might like them to. So if they're just unfolding fine and the dream is a happy dream, I've got no desire to lucidly dream. But if something becomes problematic in some way in the dream, I tend to go lucid and change the dream. And interestingly, now I'm saying that, again, what we do when we're asleep is generally what we do when we're awake. So if things are going fine in my life and everything's rolling, I don't intervene. But if something becomes problematic, I will maneuver in relation to it and create with it and change the direction of it. So I think the two kind of go hand in hand. But great question. Thank you. Your question was probably, can you hypnotize someone to be a better lucid dreamer? Probably. Even just showing them how to move their mind will do it, I should think. Okay, Henry Alexander, thank you for answering. Any shift in the client, helping them overcome their problems, really makes hypnosis one of the most powerful science in personal development. I really like hypnosis, or I really like the things I've learned from hypnosis. To me, hypnosis is about moving minds. It's just that simple. It's about moving minds, about moving our own mind, about assisting people in moving theirs. Whether you call it hypnosis or not is another thing. And a lot of what people call hypnosis, to me, isn't really hypnosis. It's a version of hypnosis. And some people think their version of hypnosis is hypnosis. So far as I'm concerned, it's a bigger thing. My advice to anyone learning hypnosis is, yeah, learn versions of hypnosis, but recognize that they're all versions and there's something bigger that they sit within. Can hypnosis hide facial micro expressions? Do you know, that question is, forgive me for saying this, I don't want to be dismissive, but it's almost meaningless to me. Why do you want to hide facial micro expressions? Will be my first question. Why would you want to do it? What I would suggest doing, you see, because your face is going to leak your inner reality. That's what it does. Your face leaks your inner reality. Your whole body does, your tonality, everything. This is why I've talked about the be, do, have model. How we are being within ourselves shapes our doing, how we show up and engage, which in turn shapes the results that we get. So here's the thing. Why would you want to mask how you are being within yourself, right? Now, the answer to that might be because how I'm being within myself isn't cool, right? People are going to judge me. And now what you've got going on there is an organization of reality, number one, where the power is out there rather than when the power is in here. Which I think is a way more of a problem, in my view, wearing my biases on my sleeve, than anything that might be coming out through facial expressions, micro expressions, and that kind of thing. So that's number one. Your organization of reality is probably out there. Otherwise, why the hell would you care? Number two, the second thing might be, wouldn't it be much cooler to reorganize yourself from the inside out? So you were just totally grounded in being a person that just lives life and makes life work, right? Wouldn't that be a better thing than trying to hide what might be leaking out? I don't know. I'm wearing my biases again on my sleeves, 100%, but that's the way it looks to me. Okay. So Stephen says, great answer. Thanks for that. I'm not sure which is the answer to. Coach Albert says, hi, James. Hi, Coach Albert. Professor G, hey, James, how do you deal with delays in life? Being patient when you wait between projects. I don't wait between projects. There's no waiting between projects in my life. So I don't know. To me, life is a continuous flow. There are no spaces between. It's just a continuous flow. So I don't have any experience of waiting between projects or waiting at all. In a way, there's a distinction which gets put in a number of different ways. And I'm a big fan of being a creator. And some people will put the distinction this way. I have heard it put this way. Are you a waiter or are you a creator? Are you proactively creating your life or are you waiting for things to happen? My choice is to resolutely stand in the realm of being a creator, of being in the driving seat of life. And if you're in the driving seat of life and if you're a creator, you're never waiting for things. Okay, so that will be my answer to that. And I hope it's a satisfactory answer. Coach Albert is asking, what do you think is the most effective way to manage or reduce anxiety? I think the most effective way is, number one, start recognizing that you're making it in your mind, that probably how you think about anxiety is wrong, number one. To me, anxiety is a lot like the Wizard of Oz, right? And what I mean by this is you look at the Wizard of Oz, in the film The Wizard of Oz, or in the book The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is this big, scary thing. It's so huge. His name is known throughout the land. You go and see the Wizard of Oz, and the Wizard of Oz is all powerful and all of this. But if you look carefully, what you find is behind a curtain, there's a funny little man cranking some levers and pulling some stuff about. And anxiety and fear in general is a lot like that. Right? When you start to see how it really works, when you become the witness to your own processes, this point again, becoming a better witness to your own processes, and you see, oh my God, all of that stuff I thought was true is not true. All of those thoughts that I thought were facts are not facts, they're just thoughts. So one of the most effective ways is starting to understand the nature of the system that creates the experience. Instead of misunderstanding the nature of the system and trying to push away the results of it, understand the nature of the system. And again, you don't. This is a huge part of the developmental coaching that I do, and a huge part of what I would call anybody's personal mastery game, because ultimately you are a hypnotist in your own life, and if you don't recognize the hypnosis you're doing and that it is hypnosis, then you're going to fall for it as reality. And then you're going to try and struggle against the reality, quote unquote, that you create, instead of recognizing that it's not even reality. Because when you see it, and when you really see it, when you become this profound witness to the process of creation within yourself, you fall out of the mind-made stuff that is creating the problem in the first place. And Henry says you talk more like an NLPer than a hypnotist. I think I talk more like a me. I think I talk more like me. I'll tell you who I talk like. I talk like an NLPer, and I talk like a hypnotist, and I talk like a Buddhist, and I talk like a Stoic. I talk like a Byron Katie fan. I talk like a general semanticist. I talk like a magician. I talk like a Buddhist. I talk like a Taoist. You see, I talk like a lot of different things, and there's a reason why I talk like a lot of different things, because I've spent a lot of time in different reality tunnels. And different reality tunnels are structured linguistically in different ways. Every reality tunnel or broader culture, it has its own language culture. NLP has a language culture. Different branches of hypnosis have different language cultures. So I talk like a lot of things. And ultimately, I talk like a guy who's shaping his experience and shaping his reality with his mind and his words and his actions and his deeds. So yeah, and different people will perceive different things in that, I think. So thank you for the observation, Henry. So I think we got to the last one. Coach Albert says, thank you, James. Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Coach Albert. Almost. Appreciate you being you, James. That's a lovely thing. Thank you, Simbai Base. And one last question, maybe. So, yeah, this one's from Brazil. And Pabok, your English is way better than my Portuguese. So the question is, what do you think about psychiatrists recommend medicines for anxiety? So this is a question about medication for anxiety. What do I think about it? I don't want to take something away from anybody that is helping them. I don't think it's a long-term solution. I don't think any medications are a long-term solution. I just read an article the other day where they're talking about actually starting to be honest about the withdrawal symptoms for SSRIs, antidepressants, that they're pretty terrible, and people have difficulty coming off them. Okay, so people that go, well, this will help people in the short term. It can often exacerbate the problem in different ways. I am not a huge fan of psychiatric medications. But if somebody finds that it's the thing that makes a difference for them, I'm not going to take that away from them. But I really don't think they're certainly not useful in doing transformative work. Almost all psychiatric medications, anti-anxiety, SSRIs, anything like that, they hinder self-development work. So I'm not really a fan of that. James, could you please mention your appreciation of Aaron Alexander's work for you? From Ohio with love. So that's Chief Click Clack. Aaron Alexander. So I got shown a few bits and pieces by a mentalist that I know, which later I discovered were from Aaron Alexander. And Aaron Alexander is a mentalist. I want to just say his book, Pygmalion Effects, which I think he doesn't have on release all the time, is really good, and his thinking is really, really good. So he's also got a piece called The Bridge, and I got his Bridge manuscript from him as well. And there's some nice ideas in that, but for me, the Pygmalion Effects piece is fantastic. And the thing that's really fantastic about it is his thinking about things. His thinking about things is exquisite. So yeah, I mentioned, shout out for Aaron Alexander. Okay. And Johnny is freed. He says, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure listening to you for today. Thank you very much. Perfect concluding comment. I'm going to jump off before anybody asks any questions. I had no intention of being on here for 1 hour and 28 minutes, but it's the way it rolls. If you ended up watching this after the fact and you're not yet subscribed to James Tripp Chaos Wave, please do subscribe. If you're looking for perspectives on using your mind to shape your life that you will not get anywhere else, hit subscribe, hit the notifications bell. If you like this, make sure you hit the thumbs up and you like it. If you didn't like it, leave a comment saying why you didn't like it, because all feedback is golden. Okay, thanks very much for being here. And until we continue the conversation, keep on shaping your life.